last month, the theme was how to measure what matters, and it was about striking the right balance between getting bogged down in measuring everything, but equally or conversely not measuring enough. So how do we know what to measure? We looked at two key concepts around leading and lagging indicators as one, the idea of those leading and lagging, but we also looked at something called the balanced scorecard, which is this is what we looked at. So those of you that came last month had a look at this. If you didn't and you're and your ScaleUp Club members, then you can access the recording and the templates and everything within the membership area. This time it's around how do we clarify roles and accountabilities in our business, and we know this is really important. And but I'm going to start with a little story that some of you may have heard. But it's a story about four people. They were named everybody, somebody, anybody, and nobody. There was an important job to be done, and everybody was sure that somebody would do it. Anybody could have done it, but nobody did it. Somebody got angry about that because it was everybody's job. Everybody thought anybody could do it, but nobody realized that everybody wouldn't do it. It ended up that everybody blamed somebody when nobody did what anybody could have done. So little story just to illustrate, bit of fun, but the takeaway that if we want our teams to be really productive, then we do need to ensure that we've got very clear roles and accountability, so that everybody's very clear on that. Bit of a blurry slide here, but this is taken from some research that we've just done with over 100 businesses, looking at the things that people find the most challenging about running a business. And the number one thing that came out was all to do with staff challenges, particularly for the businesses that are more than £100,000 turnover. And it's really hard to get staff working in the way that we want them to, and behave and make decisions in the way that we would like to as a business owner. So, are you seeing some of these things within your business? Are you seeing that maybe we're missing deadlines, we're repeating some mistakes? Maybe some people within the business have got variable workloads. Some have got more than others. Are we seeing a varying quality in the output across either over time or across people? Are we seeing that there are some people that just simply are performers and doing stuff, and others that just aren't? And are we getting a bit of tension perhaps happening between that? Because of course, that often that can lead to a bit of resentment if some people think that they're not part of that performing group, or equally if the performers actually think that people are getting away with not performing properly, so leading to anxiety and anger. So these are some of the signs of lack of accountability within the business. So it's important that we look at it. This may sound a little bit like semantics, but there is a difference between accountability and responsibility and authority. Accountability is essentially about owning something, feeling that you own that particular aspect of it. It's not so much about whether you're going to get fired for not doing it, but it's about counting it. So if we're having a catch-up session about whether we've made progress on something, who's the person that is the one that tells us how we're doing? Are we on track with it? And the one that is proposing what we do to get us back on track. And it's not shareable. There needs to be one person accountable for the big things. If you've got more than one person, then you've got a problem brewing. Whereas responsibility can be shared. We can all have a joint responsibility to help to achieve whatever it might be. So a joint responsibility, for example, to make sure we adhere to our core values. So that's about proactively supporting the team. And of course, authority is about who's got the final decision making power. So some of you may have been on leadership type exercises or little team building exercises, and if you think about it as just an example there, you might have a leader might delegate the accountability, say, for monitoring the time keeping for that particular task. So there's somebody that's accountable. So it might be Stu, might be the one that's been given the stopwatch and is the one that's saying, right, come on team, we've only got 5 minutes to go, right? So he's accountable for making sure we keep on track. But actually, as a team, we've got a joint responsibility to help to make sure that we do stick on time. So we're not just ignoring what Stu's saying, and then somebody else might have the actual final authority to make whatever the key decision is. So that's just a little bit of semantics, but it they often get confused. We often jointly interchange accountability and responsibility when we do things. And as I was saying before, it is absolutely crucial that we've got one person that is accountable, because if we don't, then essentially there is nobody that is accountable. So I'm going to take you through a couple of tools. Now, they are simple tools. I'm going to try not to overcomplicate it. I have a danger of overcomplicating things. So please do. It is. They are really simple, useful tools. And there's two tools. One is more of a list type tool, which some people want lists. Oh, and then another is a bit more of a visual type tool, which is a bit more like an organogram. So it's a bit more organic, a bit more visual. So they can be used together, and some people will prefer one from the other, but they can be used to do the same things or actually to support each other. But they'll help you to identify whether we've got the right people in the right seats doing the right things, essentially. But it will also help us to identify, if we're growing, if we're scaling our business, identify where we may need to look for the next hire, or where we may need to take the weight off of our shoulders, perhaps as the business owner next. So I encourage you to think about doing it. So if you think about any business, if you look on the right hand side here, actually, and I'm going to thank David Lynes for helping me to simplify this in a way. Any business, there's these 5 things on the right hand side that any business needs to do. We've got to bring in business to the business. Okay, we've then got to do it. So whatever it is that our business does, we've got to do it, but we've also got to count it. And in other words, we've got to do all of the systems and the processes. We've got to do HR, financial, so we've got to record it. So all the business, typically the business admin, as we would do it. So those are the 3 key things. So if you but equally, we've got to lead the business and we've got to manage the business, and sometimes they're the same person, but sometimes as the business grows, we might want to have somebody that actually is a bit more leading the business and somebody that's a bit more actually about the MD, the managing of the business. Those are the 5 things. But if you imagine an org chart, if you picture this, you've essentially got, let's just say it's you that are leading and managing it, and then you've got 3 divisions, if you like, or 3 sections to your business: the bring it, do it, count it. So bring it, sales and marketing typically; the do it, the operations typically; and the count it is finance and HR, or business admin typically. And then you can build a structure out from there. Now, the idea of this framework here, this tool, which is based on a framework, functional accountability chart that Vern Harnish proposed in his scaling up methodology, is that we divide the business by those bring it, do it, count it, lead it, manage it, and then we list down, because every business has to have those, but then what goes underneath in this left hand column varies by the business. So Stu's business might be different from Martin's business, might be different from my business, in terms of how we think about marketing and what the key aspects of marketing are, or the key aspect of sales. And equally from operations, clearly a manufacturing business will be very different from a service business. But we can list down the key functions that need to happen within the business. These are not necessarily at this point specific job roles. Okay, they're not actually positions that we've got. They're the functions that need to be done. And at this point, we're not thinking about names of the people within our business. We're just thinking about the roles, so that we list all those things down. Because then what we can do is we can say, well, who's actually accountable for it? If you're on your own, you're going to have your name in all of those things. If you've got a small team, you might have your name in quite a few of those. But equally, you might, if you have a larger team and you do this certainly with your senior leadership team, you might find that there's some gaps, or equally there's some overlaps. There's maybe some of you think that there's 2 different people that are accountable for the same thing, and as we've already heard, we know that that's not great. So what this will help you do is to see whether it'll help you to think about the key functions, first of all, that the business actually needs to do. It will then help you to think, have we got the right people in it? And then as you go across it, you can then start to put some key performance indicators, which links back to the session we had last time about leading and lagging KPIs, so that we know what counts as whether that role is being done well. And then of course we can start to think, all right, well, my name is in too many of those, so I want to get myself out of that one next. So what's the way to do that? Am I outsourcing it, or am I taking on a person to do it next? So that's the idea. It was a very quick whiz through. These are the steps that I've just outlined, and I'll just very quickly do that again. So it's essentially add any specific functions down the left-hand side, and then fill in the first column with who's accountable. Then ask yourself these questions. Do you have more than one person in a box? Is somebody in too many boxes? Do you have any blanks? And then the killer question, really, certainly if you're a business with a few people in it, would you enthusiastically rehire that person that's actually in that role that we've got accountable for it? And if the answer is no, that doesn't mean that you're going to fire them. It might do, but it might mean they're just in the wrong role. All right, but would we enthusiastically rehire them? Because what we want at the end of the day is the right people in the right seats. So, and then you can list up to 3 leading key performance indicators for each of the functions, and 3 lagging or results-based indicators as well. And then you've got a really neat summary of what the business needs to do and what good looks like for each of the key functions. The other way of looking at it then is to adapt a typical organogram, a typical organization chart, and make it more of an accountability chart. And you can see as I say, this could be a very simple business. We've got lead it, manage it, bring it, do it, and count it as the key areas. A couple of key points under each one as to what would be expected. So the lead it is around vision, culture, maybe some big relationships and problem solving and stuff like that. The manage it is much more about the managing director, looking after the P&L, the business plan, some of those other things. But then we've got the 3 areas of bring it, do it, and count it. So and that again, they'll be different for every business in terms of what goes under it as the key accountabilities of it, but you'll still have that same sort of structure. And then of course what you can do then, as you start to, what you can do is you can say, well, maybe now there's only 2 of us at the minute and we're sharing these roles. So now I can say, well, my name's on lead it and manage it, but Caroline's doing the do it and the count it, and I'm doing the bring it and sales and marketing, or whatever it might be. But in 2 years' time, when we've got all our network of franchisees and whatever in place, or something like that, or whatever the next step is in our business, we can say, right, well, now it grows. And these are the functions that need to be done there. And I think we're going to need 4 salespeople in that area. And I think we're going to need, 2 accounting people on the right hand side. But those are the, and it's a bit messy, this slide, but you can see that it's really simple as we build that out. And because what can happen otherwise, if we don't plan ahead and work towards that, and then start to think about where we might want to recruit into, we end up with a messy org chart as we grow, because we take somebody on in a role and they end up somewhere on this, maybe halfway between 2 different levels and all that sort of type stuff. And we at some point need to kind of go, okay, well, what's right for the business? So you do this without your names on it, and then you put your names on it. So that's essentially what I wanted to cover. Those 2 tools used hand in hand can, as I say, can be really good either if you're scaling as a small business and there's not really very many of you, even just you on your own, and you're looking to scale and take people on. You think about where you might need to take people on next. If you've already scaled rapidly and you're still scaling and you need to just take stock, then it's another great way of just saying, okay, well, hang on a minute, let's just forget all the names of the people we've got in the organization. Let's just map out what should be happening with the actual key accountabilities and roles that we need on the business, and then let's overlay the people we've got and see whether they're actually in the right seats or whether we need to start moving things around. So that's the idea of it. We will send out, for all of the ScaleUp Club members, we'll send out an ebook with some of those things in a little bit more, and those templates, just so that you can start to get used to those and try them yourselves. But have a think about what that might mean. And what we're going to do now is I'm going to hand over to Sara, first of all, from the HR department, to look at a little bit of a tweak maybe on that, how she sees those sort of things within her business. And then we'll hear from David Lynes as well, as I say, as to what those sort of things have meant within his business. So Sara, can I hand over to you, please?
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. Are you going to enable me to share my screen?
Yeah, so if I stop sharing, I think Caroline's probably enabled you to share already, so that should work.
Okay.
Brilliant.
Can you see that okay?
Yes, all good.
Excellent. So yeah, thanks, Kevin, and for giving me the opportunity to speak today. Well, what I want to go to is just to delve a little bit, I guess, a bit more specifically. So sort of around what accountabilities are, etc., and how you can go about setting them within your business. So specifically, an accountability is something that you'll see really as quite a major and significant job responsibility, or perhaps an initiative that you need your employees to accomplish. So it'd be perhaps one of their objectives for the year as well that you'd be measuring, etc. And most roles would have between 3 to 5 sort of major accountabilities as part of their sort of expectations and responsibilities to do. So why set them? There's a number of benefits that you'll see here, really. It helps predominantly to define priorities. So the individual knows what they need to be working on a day-to-day or week-by-week basis. It can also establish direction and clarify your expectations of the individual and just help them to understand what they should be working on. You can identify the expected results, so set the outcomes or expected outcomes and achievements from the accountabilities as well. It can certainly enhance teamwork because it sort of moves away from this silo environment. If people have accountabilities and they're made aware of others within the team, then they all know that they're sort of working towards similar goals, etc. It can improve individual performance because they know what they're focusing on. And also, I think this is really important for the business. It can link their contribution to the overall company success. They can see where their role fits within the organisation and how they're sort of assisting and aiding the organisation to reach their targets and goals for the year as well. So how do you go about setting accountabilities? So really, you just need to identify the key duties and accountabilities for that role. Now, this is slightly different than a job description because accountabilities and key duties will likely change on a year-by-year basis, but you would use the sort of the job description. So what's the main purpose of the role? But then the accountabilities, you might look at sort of the wider department goals that you're trying to achieve, the wider business goals as well. And also, if you've got any major activities planned for the year within the business, then that's an ideal way to set individual contributions within your teams. A key thing is obviously you need to meet with everybody individually to review the proposed accountabilities and agree them with them. And it can help sometimes to suggest to the individuals that they bring some accountability ideas to the table as well, because then that really encourages engagement, I think, from the individual. If they think, well, this is my suggestion, this is how I think I can help improve the business, the department, whatever. And also at that meeting, make it really clear how you're going to measure their achievement and their performance towards those accountabilities. And make sure you focus on things that are obviously observable, measurable in terms of those performance expectations. So there's no sort of discrepancy about whether they've been achieved or in fact are achievable or not. So I've just done sort of one example really of an accountability, and I've done it on an administration type role because I figure people that have got a team have generally got an administration function. So an accountability for an admin person may be to create and maintain an accurate office record management system. So accountabilities don't need to be war and peace, you know, they just need to sort of say what you need the individual to do. So it's all about a filing system, really, is the accountability. You then break that down into expectations. So what do you expect from that one individual accountability? So what you might want to see out of the overall filing one is develop an online filing system, perhaps. You may want them to maintain binders, which holds agendas and minutes of committee or executive meetings, etc. You may want to include them building confidential HR files for each employee that you've got. obviously being mindful on all of these around GDPR and things like that. You perhaps want them as part of it to archive files annually, and to make sure that all the filing is up to date and simple to use, so everybody can access it and knows how the system works, and that they're obviously doing the filing on a regular basis, because it's all too easy for filing to get out of hand. So those are sort of the expectations that fall out of an accountability. And then you might want to look at the resources that they need to fulfill that accountability. So if you're asking them to do binders for meetings, then you might need to put a budget together to purchase those binders. You might need to make sure that you've got both online for your computer and physical storage space availability. You might want to look at separate, like cloud systems, etc., sharing systems online, etc., if you don't use them already for filing. And obviously archive availability as well, so whether that's sort of a secure, fireproof shed or warehouse that you may use, or obviously you can use specific archive businesses as well. One of the most important things about when you're setting accountability is that they are regularly reviewed so that you can respond to any changes. I think what we're all more than aware of over the last 12 months is businesses can change very rapidly and change direction. So, and they're not always foreseen changes. So if you've got accountabilities that could just no longer viable because the business has changed, then you need to sit with that individual again and either set new ones or amend their existing ones accordingly, so that those benefits of having accountabilities are still appropriate in terms of the teamwork, defining priorities, etc., so they know exactly what they need to be doing. That's what I wanted to cover, really. Short and sweet, I know, but just sort of to talk you through a little bit about sort of an accountability itself, and to get you thinking about what you can do with them. And then I think David's going to talk through his business specifically and how he's used accountabilities, etc.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much, Sara. That's super. And I think, some really key points in there. Again, this is about setting expectations early on, but then monitoring it as you go. And we've talked many times about bringing in sort of 90-day planning and having that focus, and you can of course then review these accountabilities and progress on a 90-day basis, then, rather than just setting them once and then forgetting, and then people becoming less and less clear. Is that fair, Sara?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Brilliant. So I'd like to introduce David now. Over to you, David.
Yeah, morning all. David from Unique IQ. So just to give you a little bit of context, because we've sort of started to go through some of this process. So we haven't kind of finished yet, but we've grown from having kind of 7 employees to 30 in about 2 years, 18 months to 2 years. So we were in a position where, certainly my role, and certainly we've got an operations director here, her role had significantly changed with that many people coming into the business. And we were seeing some gaps. We were seeing a kind of almost like a disorganized organization chart, various levels of seniority. But because we're a development company, we are a sort of tech company, we're very heavy in that area. So more than 50% of our workforce is development type individuals. So we've got a kind of highly weighted development, sort of almost like, build it type sort of function. And, how do we split leaders in that team? How do we make sure the teams are not too big? And all those sorts of challenges, really. So I guess we sat down and we spent, at least probably sort of a day or so looking at and trying to work out and trying to forecast forward in terms of what it should look like in 2 years' time. So we sat down and we split the business into those 4 areas. So we looked at the kind of the bring it, and as Kevin said, we kind of came up with some sort of terminology around this and split our business into 4 areas. So bring it, build it, deliver it, and count it. There are 4. And what we did is it was difficult, but we took out all of our names. So even myself from that organisation chart, and we just looked at those 4 areas. And under each of those areas, we then looked at, well, again, taking names out, and that was extremely difficult. What roles do we need to fulfill if we're a business in 2 years' time? Now, we've gone through 2 years of huge change. There's lots of new people in the business. We're moving forward faster than we've ever done. So we've had to kind of challenge that, and can we continue that growth sort of level? But you know, we've got sort of 30 now, which is great and exciting. But is that 60? Is that 100? And then therefore, you know, who are those people, and what roles do we need to fulfill? So do we need more people in legal and compliance, and you know, those sorts of aspects than we've got today? How many people do we need leading that development team? So, you know, we've got sort of clearly sort of 16, 17 sort of developers in that area. That's more than what one person can kind of manage. So what does that sort of structure look like? So we flip charted it. We went old school, and we got pen to paper, and we split the business into those 4 areas. Again, very clearly sort of taking people's names out. And what that was interesting, because actually that challenged myself, you know, what my role should be, but then also challenged Cheryl, who's our operations director, and what her role should be. And like I say, what we did is we then kind of mapped out the business into those 4 areas, really sort of clear, and we were able to then take each area in isolation, and then look at what our organisation chart should look like, we think, in 2 years' time. So with that, then we're able to then, you know, build those job scorecards, and that's when we can build those roles and responsibilities and the accountabilities into those job scorecards. Now, for the development team, developers, that's nice and easy. That's one job scorecard for most of that development team. But again, we were able to tackle and deal with who's responsible for what, because at the moment I get more things on my plate than I should do, and so does Cheryl and others, because, well, we used to do those things, and some of the things are very easy to hand over and some of them are not. So, and that was part of the challenge, you know, part of the handing over and giving somebody else that responsibility and accountability to delivering that particular sort of element. So we're at a position now where we've got an organisation chart plan in terms of what we think it should look like in 2 years' time, because at the moment it's messy, because you've got a couple of directors, you've not got a very clear kind of management director sort of structure across the top of the business, and then you've got some team leaders, and that's okay. But what we've done is we mapped that out for 2 years' time, and we've got now a really clear and defined structure. And that will also help us with salaries and salary bandings, and you know, those sorts of aspects as well going forward. So there's some side benefits to that, but I think also the reality is there's going to be a little bit of pain between now and 2 years' time in terms of some people sort of coming up, you know, and having to step up in terms of those roles, but then also some people potentially not being not necessarily good enough, but not being suitable for those director roles or team lead type roles. So we haven't got it sorted yet. It's a work in progress, but I think what the actual kind of structure and the process has meant is that we've been able to subdivide our business into 4 very, very self-contained blocks. We're able to look at each of those blocks, look at who's leading those, and then yes, we can now, and we will do, we haven't quite as yet, put those names into the places. What we did do is we did go through everybody and say, would we rehire them? Would we rehire them for the current roles they're in? And there's 2 or 3 individuals we've said no, we wouldn't. So again, with that, knowing the plan and sticking to the plan, we can then actually make those changes in a constructive way, as opposed to being very reactive to, oh, suddenly we need another marketing person, or suddenly we need more sales, or suddenly we need more dev. And that's been our reality, you know, because we've grown quickly, and at times we've gone out to market and hired, you know, 5 new people, and onboarded those people, because we've not rushed it, but we've reacted to a requirement, and we've then gone and done that. But that over time has created a bit of a messy organisation chart. It's not a easy structure to kind of work with. So part of the process that we've started to go through is implementing some of this. Like I say, we haven't got it all sorted, and it's by no means finished, but actually what it's done is given us the ability to create a plan to then look forward and then actually sort of simplify the business, because I think as Kevin said, you can overcomplicate it, and we were at the risk of doing that right from the offset. So that's, I guess, a few minutes from me in terms of my kind of experience. Happy to talk through that with people any other time if they want to talk further.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for that, David. Some really good insights there. So, you know, hopefully what that's done is it's given us been able to see the picture really from, you know, what might be little sort of theoretical type tool, if you like, but how it might be applied in practice and what some of the benefits of doing an exercise like that are. And essentially, you know, as we build our businesses, we've got to be able to delegate responsibility, accountability to other people. We've got to empower them to do things. And if we don't give them the guidelines, we don't work out what those accountabilities are and make those clear for people, then people, essentially, we're just abdicating. We're just kind of saying, well, you do it, right? So we've got to be able to set that, to be able to give them the framework in which to work. And then we've got to be able to then let them do it, but not without being able to have some oversight and some metrics that we can start to do things to check on with. So some really good stuff there. Thank you, David. Thank you, Sara.